Welcome to Greece. Greece announces itself in fragments, a cliff, a whitewashed wall, a harbour, never as a single coherent view from the start. Stone here isn't backdrop, it's the main character, worn by centuries of hard light into something almost personal. Ports and ruins and mountain villages sit so close that past and present stop trying to stay separate. What keeps a civilization alive isn't marble, it's the stories that outlast the buildings where they were told. To understand Greece, it helps to slow down before the landmarks and let the country reveal its own terms first. Three seas press against Greece from three sides, and the country has never stopped being shaped by all of them. A coastline this jagged isn't an accident. Every indent became a harbour, every peninsula became a distinct community. The mountains pushed people toward the water, and the water taught them that distance is always negotiable. Ships carried more than goods across these straits. They moved language, religion, and ways of building a life. Seasons here have hard edges. Summer burns, coastal winters soften, mountain passes close. The body adapts accordingly. The whiteness of Greek architecture is a thermal decision, not an aesthetic one, buildings engineered to survive the sun. Stone dictated the vocabulary, columns, arches, fortress walls, each one a direct reply to the terrain underneath. What grows here ends up on the table: olive, vine, herb, fish, a cuisine with almost no distance between field and fork. A pagan sanctuary, a Byzantine chapel, an Ottoman fountain, the layers of faith in Greece rarely cancel each other out. No single empire owns Greek history. The timeline passes through too many hands for any one of them to claim it fully. The UNESCO count is just a number. What it represents is a country that kept building things worth protecting across 3 millennia. Olympus is geological fact and mythological address at once, the mountain where the vertical first became the sacred. Most of the islands are uninhabited. The ones with communities share a particular density of daily life and sea. Greeks gather to talk, not to hurry. Squares, cafes, and harbour walls define the social architecture as much as any building. With that context in place, the places themselves can speak, each one adding a different layer to the whole. Santorini. The caldera view on arrival, by ferry from below or by road from above, immediately sets the terms for everything else on the island. Fira and Oia sit on the caldera's inner rim. The drop to the water below them is around 300 meters of vertical black cliff. The old donkey path from the port to Fira is steep and worn smooth. Most visitors take the cable car, but the path tells you more. In the village of Pyrgos, away from the caldera edge, ordinary island life continues: bakeries, cats, quiet stone streets. Oia's blue domes are real and surrounded by real crowds. The beauty and the commerce have become inseparable by now. The black beach at Perissa is volcanic in origin and practical in character, a beach that looks like nowhere else in Greece. Akrotiri, buried by the eruption, is to Santorini what Pompeii is to Vesuvius, violence preserved as readable evidence. Santorini rewards the visitor who arrives early before the crowds, when the caldera is briefly just geology and light. Mykonos. Mykonos's reputation precedes it completely. The actual island sometimes surprises people by being smaller, windier, and more beautiful. The windmills above Kora were built to grind grain. They now grind out photographs, a shift in function that tells the island's story. Little Venice earns its name through proximity, buildings overhanging the water, a small district that photographs larger than it is. The lanes of Kora were designed to disorient, a defensive maze that confused wind and pirates equally, still effective on the latter. The southern beaches operate on their own schedule, infrastructure built for volume, not for quiet afternoons. By late afternoon, the day visitors clear, and a different, more specifically local rhythm begins to take shape. Mykonos after midnight is as advertised. The morning after empty lanes, clean light, cats on whitewash is the version worth catching. The island holds ancient Cycladic structure and international ambition in the same narrow, wind-scoured street, both things fully present. Naxos. The Portara, the marble gateway on the harbour islet, is visible from the ferry before anything else about the island becomes clear. Naxos town has a depth most Cycladic capitals lack, a Venetian castro, a working market, layers that serve the island, not visitors. The island's interior is its strongest argument: marble villages, Byzantine chapels, terraced hillsides that predate the concept of tourism. The Tragia Plateau has olive groves, pigeon towers, and walking trails, an agricultural landscape that island brochures rarely show. The western beaches are long, sandy, and backed by low dunes, generous and unhurried, a reminder that this is still an Aegean island. Naxos is the island for visitors who find Santorini too theatrical. It offers the Cycladic experience without requiring the performance. Crete. Crete's size changes the logic of visiting. You don't tour it, you navigate it, the way you would a country rather than an island. The north coast is developed and road accessible. The south is rougher and requires more intention to reach. Heraklion works as a city first and a destination second, which makes it more interesting than its reputation suggests. Chania's Venetian harbour is the island's most immediately beautiful corner, architecture and water justifying each other. Rethymno sits between the two larger cities in distance and in character: smaller old town, quieter harbour, more digestible pace. The Cretan interior, gorges, mountain plateaus, stone villages, is a completely different landscape from the coast. Crete resists the single-image summary. It's too large and too varied for any one photograph to stand for the whole. Corfu. Corfu's first impression is chromatic, greener and damper than almost any Greek island, carrying a quality the Aegean never has. The Venetian arcade and the wide Spianata Square give Corfu town a civic scale that most island capitals never achieve. Two forts flank the town on opposite sides, and both still organize how the city is read when approaching from the sea. The channel between Corfu and the Albanian coast is narrow. The island feels less isolated than it does strategically positioned. Away from the capital, the coast alternates between accessible beaches and rocky coves that take effort to reach and repay it. The north of the island operates at half speed, olive groves, fishing villages, a pace that doesn't acknowledge peak season. Corfu is the most European of the Greek islands, which is either its distinction or its complication depending on expectations. Elafonisi. Elafonisi sits at the southwestern tip of Crete, far enough from the main routes that the journey is already part of the experience. The lagoon is shallow enough to wade across, and crossing to the islet gives arrival a physical, almost participatory quality. The sand's pink tint from crushed shell and coral is visible in full sunlight and subtle in cloud, something you look for, not at. Wind from the south keeps even calm days in motion. Stillness here is relative, never quite complete. By midday in summer, the beach fills. By late afternoon, when most visitors leave, the place returns to something closer to itself. Approached without expectations, Elafonisi is quietly remarkable, a margin where scale shrinks and detail becomes the only subject. Kefalonia. Melisani, the underground lake where a collapsed ceiling opened to the sky, is the island's most disorienting first impression. The coastal road on the western edge gives a consistent sense of the island's scale, bigger and hillier than most people expect. Myrtos Beach announces itself from the road above before the descent, white pebble and deep blue, seen from the top first. Fiscardo in the north survived the 1953 earthquake and holds the physical memory of what Venetian-era Kefalonia once looked like. Argostali, rebuilt after the earthquake, has the slightly provisional feeling of a city reconstructed carefully from a plan. The north coast keeps its own quiet register, smaller harbors, older boats, and a pace of life that hasn't scaled to tourism. Kefalonia stays with you as an island that holds more than it shows. The cave, the cliff, the village are one geological character. Cavale. Cavale's harbor is the visual anchor. Everything else in the city seems to be oriented toward or away from the water. The old quarter rises steeply above the port, and that relationship between height and say defines how the city feels to move through. The fishing boats, the nets, the smell of the morning catch, the harbor here is working infrastructure, not decoration. The aqueduct arches visible from the modern streets are a quiet reminder that Kavala has been a transit point for a very long time. The upper town rewards slow walking, tilted streets, old doorways, and sea views that only reveal themselves in stages. Between hilltop and waterfront, the city holds a layered tension that resolves differently depending on which direction you move. This is a northern Greek maritime register, heavier in tone, older in feeling, less immediately obvious than the south. Zakynthos. Zakynthos is one of the most photographed Greek islands, which means the gap between image and reality is worth thinking through. Navajo Beach is real and genuinely striking, but the platform above it is as busy as the beach below it is pristine. The sea turtle nesting beaches on the south coast aren't tourist attractions, they're conservation zones with a complicated coexistence. The quieter southern beaches reward visitors who arrive early or late, when numbers drop and the logic of the place reasserts itself. The port town of Zakynthos isn't photogenic, but it's functional, a reminder that the island has residents, not just guests. Inland olive groves and village churches offer no dramatic scenery, just the ordinary working texture of island life. The most honest version of Zakynthos sits between the iconic cove and the quiet Turtle Beach, somewhere in the deliberate middle. Lefkada. Lefkada's bridge connection gives it a different energy, always getting visitors who didn't quite plan a full island trip. The causeway and lagoon at the northern entrance create a liminal landscape that reads as neither fully sea nor fully land. The white cliffs of the west coast are visible from far out at sea, a landmark that earns its reputation at distance as well as up close. The island is a windsurfing destination for specific reasons. The wind is consistent, directional, and doesn't apologize. Villages on the eastern coast face calm channel water. Villages on the west face the open Ionian. The difference in character is immediate. The southern tip is the most exposed part, more sea, more wind, less shelter, more sky than anywhere else on the island. Lefkada shows that easy access and genuine wildness aren't mutually exclusive. The island keeps both without apology. Mykonos. The approach by road doesn't reveal the town, it reveals only the rock. The town stays hidden until the very last turn. Once through the gate, the outside world genuinely disappears. A single entrance changes both the acoustic and the light. The stone lanes carry a residual coolness even in summer, and the silence is broken mainly by footsteps and distant water. Doorways are short and walls are thick, architecture built to withstand siege, not to welcome visitors on their terms. The ruined upper town above the inhabited lower section adds a second register, the abandoned version of the same story. Mykonos is one of the few places in Greece where the past hasn't been softened for comfortable consumption. target. Parga reads as a postcard from the waterfront and something considerably older from the hillside. The gap is the town's real character. Terraced houses in ochre and terracotta climb toward the old castle in a progression that feels instinctive rather than planned. The small harbor concentrates the town's daily life, fishing boats, cafe chairs, and morning light doing most of the work. The fortifications above weren't decorative. The sea visible from their walls was a threat as often as it was a resource. Behind the seafront, the hills are green and cool, a different Parga that requires more effort to reach and rewards it. The town manages to be simultaneously attractive and defensible, a combination that explains why it was worth holding for so long. After sunset, the lit facades and dark water give Parga a different quality. The charm recedes and the age of the place asserts itself. Thessaloniki. Thessaloniki doesn't ask you to find its history. The history is simply there beside the coffee shop and the tram line. The city's topography does architectural work. The upper neighborhoods look down on the lower city and the sea beyond it. A Roman arch, a Byzantine rotunda, an Ottoman bath, they survive in Thessaloniki as street furniture, not museum exhibits. Eating in Thessaloniki is treated as a civic matter. The city considers its food culture and identity, not just a local custom. The waterfront square at dusk collects the city's social life, the way a harbor collects boats, naturally, without effort. Younger than Athens in atmosphere, if not in years, Thessaloniki wears its historical weight with noticeably less ceremony. The city's energy after dark isn't performed for visitors, it's the actual metabolism of the place running on its own clock. Nafplio. Nafplio is small enough to understand in an afternoon and complex enough to reward a longer stay. The first capital earns both. The old town's narrow streets deliver moments of unexpected color, painted shutters, hanging laundry, a cat on a warm stone step. The Palamidi fortress sits 216 meters above the town, and the staircase makes the military logic of the site viscerally clear. From the top, the Argolic Gulf opens wide and calm below. The water reads here as protection rather than exposure. Bertzi, the small fort on the offshore islet, adds a maritime note to the town's layered defenses, visible from the quayside. Seen from across the bay, Nafplio compresses into a dense stripe between mountain and sea, compact, deliberate, precisely placed. Nafplio holds the memory of a specific political moment, not classical Greece, but the fragile start of the modern nation. Delos. Delos is 12 minutes by boat from Mykonos and roughly 2,000 years away from it in atmosphere. The island was too sacred for birth or death, which perhaps explains why it carries the particular silence of a place held apart. The Terrace of the Lions faces the site of the sacred lake that no longer exists, 5 marble animals guarding an absence. The residential district, with its mosaic floors and intact doorways, makes the island's former prosperity measurably domestic. Delos closes at day's end and returns to silence, to birds, to wind, to whatever the ruins hold when no one is watching. Minoan Palace of Narcissus. Narcissus is the oldest complex on European soil, built with the intention of impressing the people who arrived at it. The palace is organized around a central court, but the routes to it were deliberately indirect, labyrinthine in the exact sense. Evans's controversial reconstructions make Narcissus readable in a way pure ruins rarely are, a trade-off, not a distortion. The frescoes, even in reproduction, change the emotional register of the site. This was decorative, intentional, and inhabited. The scale of the storage magazines, rows of enormous pithos jars, makes the economic role of the palace physically obvious. Narcissus recalibrates the Greek timeline. Complex civilization here predates the classical age by over 1,000 years. Athens. The Acropolis is visible from most of central Athens, which means the ancient city keeps watching the modern one at all times. Streets in Athens don't make space for ruins. The ruins make space for the streets, and somehow both manage. Seen from below, the Parthenon is about proportion. Seen from beside it, it becomes a statement about endurance. The noise level on the streets below the hill is a useful corrective. This is not a monument, it is a functioning city. Light at midday flattens Athens into white and shadow. Light at dusk briefly lifts the Acropolis into something else entirely. The rooftop view over Athens makes the density legible, a grey plain broken by hills and the vertical punctuation of ruins. Athens is living proof that a city can carry its own historical weight without collapsing, although some days it's close. Delphi. Before the ruins appear, Delphi announces itself through atmosphere. The mountain narrows, the air cools, the road slows. The path through the sanctuary moves upward. Every step adds altitude and subtracts noise in roughly equal measure. This was where Greek city-states sent their most difficult questions. The geography still makes that choice feel logical. Scattered across the hillside, the stones hold the specific silence of something consulted and then left behind. The panorama from the top opens suddenly, a wide valley below, and the awareness that thousands made this exact climb before. Delphi works not as a monument to certainty, but as a monument to the human need for it, the hunger for direction. The mountain recedes slowly on the way out, and what it leaves behind feels less like memory and more like an open question. Meteora. The first view of Meteora stops the car, pillars of bare rock rising from flat ground with monasteries balanced on top. Monks chose this height not for the view but for the vertical distance from interruption. The landscape enforced the rule. The interiors are dim and dense, centuries of candle smoke, icon gold, and prayer absorbed into plaster that doesn't give it back. The staircases cut into rock convert elevation into effort, and effort into something that slowly starts to feel like ritual. The drop visible from the monastery walls isn't threatening so much as clarifying. It returns the body to a proper sense of scale. What survives here isn't just architecture, it's the argument that faith sometimes needs to be physically inaccessible to be genuine. Meteora holds a uniquely vertical chapter of Greece, one that has nothing to do with sea, island, or any coastline. Mount Olympus. The lower slopes of Olympus look like any northern Greek forest. The mountain's full significance only arrives with altitude. The trail marks progress through shifting vegetation, cooling air, and a growing absence of any human sound. Refuges halfway up offer shelter and a pause, positions from which you can look back at the distance already covered. Cloud cover around the summit isn't unusual, it's typical, which makes the upper reaches feel genuinely withheld. At the treeline, wind becomes the dominant presence, and the mountain stops pretending to be hospitable to anyone. Olympus earns its mythological status through physical argument. Climb it, and the idea of gods living up here stops seeming absurd. The descent returns the mountain to full view as a whole, and that complete view is somehow more imposing than the summit itself. Corinth canals. Standing above the Corinth Canal, the first reaction is simple disbelief that the cut through the rock is this narrow and this deep. A ship navigating the channel has almost no clearance on either side. The canal turns passage into a kind of controlled tension. This is Greece's engineering problem solved, a canal connecting two seas through solid limestone still in daily use. Epidaurus. Epidaurus asks you to sit in the highest row and listen to a coin dropped at the center. The acoustic geometry is still fully working. The theater was built within a sanctuary of healing, which reframes what you hear. Performance here was understood as treatment. In this bowl of stone and hillside, ancient Greece made the argument that beauty and health share the same underlying architecture. Greece doesn't resolve into a clean conclusion. Each place opens questions that the next place answers differently. The through line isn't marble or myth, it's the way this country holds old things without freezing them in place. What stays with you is built from small details, a quality of afternoon light, the sound of a harbor at dusk, the weight of a stone step. Greece is still in the process of being itself, older than its monuments, more complicated than its mythology, and still unfinished.